Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, our guest is Steve Flowers, political columnist and TV personality. Also, the V-Team takes a look at the media frenzy surrounding Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. And Mike Hubbard says he's a conservative reformer. What, like Spiro Agnew? A blast from the past. All this coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt. I'm joined as always by the V-Team. Hi all.
Good morning.
Let's get right to it. A new study coming out of Troy University absolutely contradicts a UAB study that says that Medicaid expansion would be profitable for the state. What are the facts? Who's right? Who's wrong? Is there any way we can know?
Well, I have to say that I think we can compare the Medicaid study that came out of Troy University to Jack's tie with his alligators. It just ate up the previous study that was done by UAB and the University of Alabama. What this new study says is that if Medicaid were expanded, the state would face a loss, not a gain, of $450 million. If you compare that with what the UAB and the University of Alabama studies showed, that they hypothetically supposed a gain of $1 billion. And so I think it's probably about halfway for both of those. I mean, that's the problem. I've said all along since we've been doing this show that I would like to see a study on why we should not expand Medicaid because I had not seen one. And now that I have, I really question the validity of it when you compare it with the other two studies.
Well, truth and efficacy of science, or university studies should be something that we care deeply about, but this study has been questioned by a lot of folks. And so
it's tough to predict the future. I think that's the lesson here. It's tough to look in there. Every future study of government programs is always wrong. You look at the projected cost of Medicare when it first came out, the projected cost of Medicare Part D when it came out 10, 15 years ago. They're always wrong. They're always vastly either understated or overstated. You can't know how things are going to act in a vacuum. You can't know how things are going to act in the real world when you're studying them in a vacuum on a piece of paper. It just doesn't work that way. My guess is ideology drove the results of both of these studies. My guess is the person started the study with a notion of what would happen and reached the conclusion they wanted to reach.
Well, and that's often true in politics, isn't
ask
it?
any Politico and they can skew a poll to say what they want it to say.
What is it Mark Twain said? They're lies, damn lies, and statistics. I mean, and that's one of the biggest differences between these two studies is that they began with vastly differing assumptions. And so if you start with vastly differing assumptions, you're going to get vastly differing outcomes. So I still want to see what I would consider a content-neutral study, a political neutral study.
Well, and one of the things is that that isn't true is they said that this UAB study was paid for by the Hospital Association. Dane Howard, Vice President of the Hospital Association, categorically denied that they had any input into the UAB study, didn't finance it, didn't ask for it, anything else. One thing for sure that we won't see is a lottery in Alabama, yet Craig Ford, minority leader of the House, has called for a lottery, and he says Governor Bentley said he wanted one when he was running for office, that he wanted an up or down vote from the people on a lottery. What do you think about that, Jack?
When I talked to Governor Bentley when he was a candidate in 2010, I don't think he favors a lottery, but I think he favors a vote of the people. And he said about gambling, he said, we do an up or down vote in the House and Senate, and it passes and it goes to the people. I will let the people decide. If they want it, I'll sign it. If not, I don't want it brought up for another 10 years because it always bogs down the session.
Well, you know a lot about gaming, and so you would know a lot about this. Could you share your thoughts?
I do, and I agree. It's not going to happen this session. I mean, this is. I think they're trying to get done very quickly because it is an election year. They don't want anything that's going to be too terribly controversial. It's not going to get over to the Senate. I mean, this is just not going to happen. I do think that if it were put to a vote of the people, that it would pass. There's overwhelming support. There are a number of polls over the last 2 years that show that a state lottery is highly favored by a substantial majority of the Alabama electorate.
Yeah, you can't find a poll that shows lottery polling under 70%. When you ask Alabamians, any district, do you want an up or down vote on a lottery, or do you want a creation of a lottery in the state of Alabama? 70+% across the board always say yes.
Well, we're completely surrounded by lotteries. I mean, everybody's got
3 of the
one,
4
it seems.
states.
Yeah,
3 out of 4
Don
states.
Siegelman would probably say that was one of the issues that elected him back in 1998 was a lottery issue, but when it came up, people rejected it because the preachers and other folks that were against the lottery did a dadgum good job of public relations campaign about why it was not a good idea.
You want to talk about get out the vote? I mean, they were putting them on church buses and driving them to the polls.
Well, not only that, though, it's been 15 years.
Really?
That was a long time ago.
That never happened.
A lot of people say, well, we've already had an up or down vote on the lottery. Well, we did 15 years ago.
Right. Things have changed in 15
Yeah,
years.
absolutely.
Something that hasn't changed in 15 years, and it's been sort of a media feeding frenzy, is this story of Tutwiler Women's Prison. I mean, this thing has hit the national media, New York Times, everybody is talking about it, but yet they failed to mention the fact that the study that the Department of Justice did is over a year old, and the governor and Kim Thomas, the commissioner of the Department of Corrections, have done a lot to correct the problems. But Tutwiler is still a hellhole, isn't it?
Well, it is a hellhole, and I thought the governor made one of the greatest quotes of his entire administration to date. I thought his quote about the Tutwiler story was better than his performance with the tornadoes, which was widely considered one of his great moments. He said, we're going to treat these people with dignity. That's something you don't hear from public officials about people in prisons very often. I think Governor Bentley is a man of deep personal faith and believes every human being, regardless of what mistakes they made, is entitled to a certain level of dignity. And I think he will do, if the legislature will act and get out of the way, I think he will do that and restore dignity to Alabama's prison system.
Well, one of the things they're going to have to do regardless is they're going to have to increase funding to the prisons. And I think one of the things that Governor Bentley did mention in his press release in the last several days was that he has gotten the legislature to increase funding by about $24 million to be able to implement some of these changes because, frankly, the Alabama Department of Corrections can come up with any number of ways to solve the problems that we have in Tutwiler and in the remaining prisons because this is an issue that is statewide. It's not just limited to Tutwiler. But without money to be able to do it, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought it was interesting, and Jack, you can speak to this, I'm sure. He said that if reelected, he would want to build more prisons, and we only got about 30 seconds, but from a political standpoint, how's that going to play?
Well, if he had a stronger opponent, he might not have said it. But no, I think Bentley's a compassionate guy. I mean, if you look at conditions in prisons, they're horrible. I mean, prisons are, if they ever had a chance to be reformatory or anything but with the conditions that exist there now. So I'm proud of him for stepping out on it.
Well, and Jack and I were having this debate before we started taping about whether it was punitive or whether it was rehabilitative.
I'm going to have to cut you off. We got to go. Our guest coming up is Steve Flowers, political columnist and media personality. Stay put. You're watching The V.
The V is sponsored by Ginger Barbie, attorney at law. And MediaWorks Communications, video production services for all your video production needs. Here's what customers are saying about WeatherGuard Lifetime Metal Roofing.
Knocked the roof out in about a day and a half, and then they threw in our shed with the spare parts they had. It was just a wonderful blessing to to the fire station.
The tax credit was a big bonus.
Hello, I'm Robert Wells, president of Weather Guard. We are a family-owned business and we will back our lifetime warranty for generations to come.
Come by our showroom on Alton Road in Birmingham. WeatherGuard Lifetime Metal Roofing, 533-7322.
It's time to take a road trip.
In Alabama, the road and the restaurants are calling. We've elevated barbecue to an art form, a meat masterpiece. Fine dining your thing? National awards are putting us on the map.
Because everything's fresh and local.
And if you like your dinner with a view, well, you can't beat this. Alabama has a road trip with your name on it.
Which one you gonna take?
Welcome back to the Voice of Alabama Politics. Our guest today is Steve Flowers, political columnist and television personality, media personality, really, you're everywhere.
Well, I enjoy Alabama politics, as you know.
We certainly are thankful to have you here today. You know, I have become to look at you, and many, many people around the state look at you as the premier political historian of our time, because you really have such a grasp of our state's history when it comes to the political field. Would you mind sort of taking a look at this last quadrennium and giving us a historical perspective, how you see it fitting into the history and how you think as a whole it's worked?
Well, thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me on the show. I enjoy your show, and I enjoy the V team, and I watch it every week.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
I enjoy watching it. Pertaining to your question, you know, as the Republicans took control of the legislature in 2010, in the tidal wave, what I call tsunami election in 2010, that was the last bastion of Democratic control, was the state legislature. Right. You know, the governors, and we've been Republican presidential since '64. And they came into office. This was a group of very conservative, mostly 50-ish businessmen. A lot of them were small business owners. And Bill, you can't have a more conservative individual or Republican than a small business owner.
Right.
A guy who owns a car dealership or dry cleaners or whatever. And there were a lot of those guys in that group in 2010. And they have put what I call an indelible conservative stamp on Alabama state government. This group are not rhinos.
Right.
They are sure enough conservatives, and they have gone in almost lockstep fashion to try to stamp out any Democratic opposition, almost in a Machiavellian move.
Right, right.
You know,
some people would say that's not a great thing,
no.
though.
But they have the strongest, of course, obvious pro-democratic group was the Alabama Education Association.
Right, right.
They made a concerted effort to stomp on that group and almost torpedo everything Dr. Hubbard did for the last 3 decades.
Right.
He moved Alabama teachers from being like 45th in the nation to probably in the middle of the country as far as compensation and retirement benefits and that sort of thing. They have almost traversed back to being 45th in this quadrennium. So having said that, this group, as I mentioned, are not rhinos. They're conservative, and they put a mark on state government. They have also balanced the budget on the backs of those people.
Right.
They have basically balanced the state budgets on the backs of state employees and teachers. And believe it or not, most teachers in this state vote Republican.
Yeah, they do. I know. I've seen some polls that say they do.
And they vote on social issues.
Right.
They're conservative people. They're very church-going, conservative people. People who teach school. I think teaching school is one of the highest callings you can have, to be a school teacher.
Right.
I think being a minister, being a school teacher, being a medical doctor are almost like callings. But this group of not rhinos, conservative Republicans, have what I call stampeded on and stomped on state employees, and they've actually balanced the budgets on state employees and teachers' backs. They've lost ground. This is the only era, the only quadrennium, Bill, since the Great Depression, when teachers have gone backwards in compensation. They've lost money.
Right.
And this is a group that should be angered.
Right. And I think they are. I think they're upset.
They should be. I mean, they have been stomped on. And I think Governor Bentley realizes that.
Yeah.
He's very, reluctant to say they balance. I've asked him before, you balance the state budgets on state employees' backs.
Right, right.
And he has a sore spot about that. He defends that, but it actually is true.
Well, he's come out and said that if they do not pass this 2% pay raise for teachers, he's going to veto it. But Dale Marsh, the Senate President Pro Tem, has said it doesn't matter what the governor wants. We're going to do it our way. Isn't this sort of a hallmark of this quadrennium as well? The governor saying one thing, the legislator doing another?
I don't know. They've been on the same page the first couple of years.
Right.
I think on this issue, Governor Bentley feels strongly about that they've gone too far in their stance. Bill, I don't know if you're not from the country. There's, the northern part of the state of Alabama was built on 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
And there's Mule Day in Winfield. And they said that, you tell a mule to go G to the right and halt to the left. You've heard that saying.
I know that one, yes,
This
I do.
group only knows one word, G. They only go G. They don't go haul at all.
They don't go haul.
But it has been an interesting 4 years. And, the lines are drawn, so I don't think the partisan makeup will change. It's just a matter of whether more moderate people sit in those seats in the next 4 years. They've done some same things, though, Bill. They passed the budgets late, and they've also put pork in the budget for themselves.
Yeah. Well, we pointed that out on a number of occasions. We've got about 2 minutes left. You've seen some bad things happen in our state, some good things in our state. How does this compare with the best of legislation that you've seen come out of the state?
This group of legislators, in order to try to be so right-wing, have passed what I think is almost ludicrous legislation.
Really?
It's such posturing and pandering, starting with the immigration bill, which anybody on the face knew that it was unconstitutional, and to this session's abortion bill is obviously unconstitutional.
Right.
It's almost like, they're trying to pander.
Right.
And almost taking a page from George Wallace. Let's send them a message. Let's just do it whether we know it's unconstitutional or not. Let's be so far to the right that we can't have anybody say we're a rhino.
With 1 minute left, what do you hope for the future of our state?
Well, I think the state has a lot. We've had the most natural resources. We've got the best people. And I think in a second term, you may see the governor come more to the middle.
Right.
I think he'll be reelected. And I think you saw a portion of that bill this week. He said he visited the prisons. And no, it's not popular to spend money on prisons.
Right.
But he saw that we're in dire straits and there may be some movement to give the general fund some money in the next 4 years. It's been since 1983 since the general fund's had any new money.
Well, we know that we've got a long way to go, but I think we'll get there 1 inch at a time. I want to thank you for being our guest today, and do come back often. Our guest today has been Steve Flowers. You're watching The V. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with The VT.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group. Here's what customers are saying about WeatherGuard Lifetime Metal Roofing.
Knocked the roof out in about a day and a half, and then they threw in our shed with the spare parts they had. It was just a wonderful blessing to the fire station.
The tax credit was a big bonus.
Hello, I'm Robert Wells, president of WeatherGuard. We are a family-owned business, and we will back our lifetime warranty for generations to come.
Come by our showroom on Alton Road in Birmingham. WeatherGuard Lifetime Metal Roofing, 533-7322.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European Pro Golf Tours, 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice, 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs of autism.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. Steve Flowers really knows his political history and has so many good things that we can learn. You've known him for quite some time, haven't you, John?
I have. Steve's an old friend, and he's been around the process, was a part of the process. Now he witnesses it from afar, and he's very sagacious, if I use that word correctly.
That's a big word.
Not sure I can spell it.
If you can't spell it, you can't use it.
Anyway, he puts it down where the guts can get to it, and his knowledge is both wide and deep about politics.
Well, he's a great guy, and we need to have him on more often to give some analysis on this thing. One of the things that we've been looking at this week, I know you guys have, we have over at the Alabama Political Reporter, is Mike Hubbard, in his vanity publication, Storming the State House, spent 6 pages talking about wooing Barry Moore and his wife to run for the legislators, run to be a legislator. That's more time than he spent on his mother and father, by the way. Now, Barry...
Must have been a reason.
Well, Barry has helped himself to the trough, the government trough here lately. And Barron, you know quite a bit about this, don't you?
You know, one of the things we did was, in looking into Barry Moore, is kind of look at where this state contracts have come from. He had never done business with the state, as far as I can tell, before he became an elected official. Within 2 months, he's getting a big fat contract from ADEM. He's gotten a couple of more contracts from ADEM. You know, his business, if you get on his website, says it's a minority-owned business. I don't know if you know Barry Moore, but he and his wife both look Scandinavian as far as I'm concerned. I'm not exactly sure what his angle is on all this, but I know where there's smoke, there's fire. And if a man has never done business with the state, gets elected, and is all of a sudden doing business with the state, that's awfully smoky.
Yes.
Well, there's so much of that's been going around, hasn't it, Claire?
And the whole thing that I was going to talk about this morning is all these people, and the speaker had a platform that were running on new reform and transparency in state government. And there absolutely has been zilch of transparency in state government. You go from PACs and now you go to this stuff. I mean, they filed these 501c3s, nobody can follow the money, it's difficult. And then you get all these new elected people and you get them in the system and they're getting more contracts one after another. They're doing just the same as they claim all the other Democrats have done.
Right. You had something you wanted to talk about really from last week, didn't you?
Yeah, excuse me, I think I'm talking too much. Anyway, just for the record, I wanted to set it straight because I did make a mistake last week. I had mentioned that Senator Tom Whatley from over in Auburn, Lee County, had taken $97,000 from the new leadership PAC, and that was actually money from the 2010 election cycle, and he did not take that much. He only took probably about 13 to 23. So just for the record, I want to set that straight.
We weren't wrong about how much money he took from Obama, though, were we?
Tom Whatley gave $4,600 to Barack Obama. That's beyond dispute. That's part of the record, and that didn't change since last week.
I want to go back to corruption for a minute. Plank number 3 in the Handshake with Alabama, the document that Mike Hubbard created and brought to light in August of 2010, where all these candidates, Republican candidates, signed it. Third platform, ending corruption in Montgomery. Right. It's gotten worse.
It's rampant.
We've hired 3 full-time researchers at our firm just to unearth all the skank that's out there in the state right now. It's just unbelievable.
Well, I've written 50 stories on Hubbard, and I haven't even scratched the surface yet of all his wrongdoing.
Well, what about all his contracts? I mean, I've never, in my tenure, and I've been back working in the legislative process and Republicans and representing business clients, I have never seen a speaker take contracts and then say, oh, they're for economic development, when they can be impacted in the legislative process, and that's what this speaker is doing.
Well, this American Pharmaceutical Cooperative, Inc., that's a huge contract, and there's some real ramifications behind that, isn't there, Barron?
Well, there are. He had 23 words inserted in that would have essentially given him a monopoly on the pharmaceutical business in Medicaid, while he was taking a $12,000 a month contract with them, and while he was sitting on the bench as Speaker of the House. During that time, he cast 11 votes in favor of that bill. That's
egregious. I'm sorry, it really is.
Yeah. This certainly goes against what he promised the folks, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it was just it's just hoodwinking the public about how great things were going to be, how they were going to change, and how it's going to be a new day in Alabama. It's a new day, all right. It's a bad day.
Well, traditionally, if you are a senator or a House member and you work for an institution or you're in a certain kind of industry, you normally recuse yourself from that vote.
Well, he voted 11 times. If it's bribery, that's 11 counts of bribery with 1 to 10 years per count. That's a lot hard time in one of our underfunded prisons, isn't it?
Well, I'm surprised
like
he
the
hadn't been a
governor's gonna
champion
build
of
some
prison
more, though.
reform. Yeah, I'm surprised he hadn't been a champion of prison reform this last session.
Yeah, you might want to. Some of that gruel that you get fed at St. Clair Correctional Facility won't fit in Mike's mouth like those filet mignons he get from the lobbyist. Listen, what about this little plan here that comes to mind? Mike said he's a conservative reformer, but the little plant was a gift to us after Mike had $2,500 worth of silk plants delivered to the Speaker's office at the taxpayer's expense. He didn't. He once we found out about it, he turned himself in and said, "Oh, that was a mistake," and he paid for the plants and gave them to the.
No, he didn't pay for them. He paid for them out of his campaign account.
Campaign money.
Right.
Oh,
And,
not
and what
even his
the
own
state
money,
is
right?
paying, what the state's paying employees in his office is unbelievable.
Well,
If you
and if
compare
you-
the budget of his office and that of Seth Hammond, his predecessor, it's probably, and I haven't, but I will
It's-
guarantee you it's pretty
Well, he has
smelly.
at least 5 more employees
Oh,
than the
yeah.
former speaker had.
It's the largest Speaker's budget ever.
And if you go, if you don't go up there all the time, and I know most of y'all don't, but if you were there 4 years ago, if you would look at the Taj Mahal, how they've taken up the floors, they've had the seal put down. I mean, they have spent a lot of money making the 5th floor look like it's something very special and very fancy.
I'll say this. Mike Hubbard could end all this speculation about how many contracts he has. I'll call on him right now. Release your tax returns. Give me 3 years of tax returns since you've been Speaker of the House. And if you won't, you're shady.
Well, no doubt he's shady. I don't have any doubt about that. It's just how shady is he? We got about 1 minute. Anything particular on your mind? We're facing the end of the session. Anything on your mind, Jack?
The session doesn't affect me one way or the other.
I don't even notice
that's
it's going
by
on.
design. I do not want to be a lobbyist. I did it once, and I don't
Well,
ever want to do it again.
How about you, Claire?
Well, Birmingham Waterworks has been a big issue, been struggling and fighting over that. Carly's Law, the medical thing with marijuana, and those have gone back and forth, and they passed that in the Senate this past week.
And then the Bob Riley bill that's up that
Oh, it
makes
failed.
him, enriches
It failed.
him, Section 8 housing bill.
It was, I believe, I wasn't down in the House. I've been spending a lot of time in the Senate, but it failed on Tuesday, failed on the BIR vote in the House.
Well,
that should
Bob's
send
not
a
getting
signal.
as much love as he used to, that sexy beast. Well, listen, you've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We're on ABC 3340 and ABC 32 and coming to the Shoals and Huntsville next week. Thanks for watching. We're The V.